Hello friends, I welcome you to tonight's edition of Sleep Story. Tonight I will continue reading for you from the collection of sleep stories entitled Sandman's Good Night Stories. If you would like to hear more of these stories, I would encourage you to subscribe and click the like button. And now it is time to unwind. Find yourself a place where you can relax. Once you have settled into that place, take a deep breath. The day has come to an end. There is nothing left to do for you but relax and get ready for sleep. So let's take another deep breath and let us begin these stories. The Little China Shepherdess. On the parliamental of a farmhouse stood little China Shepherdess. In one hand she held a gilt crook, and with the other she shaded her eyes and gazed far away. Probably she was looking for her sheep. Her dress was of red and green, and it was trimmed with gilt. Her boots were also gilt. On the other end of the mantel stood a little china flute player. He was dressed in red and white, and his flute was gilt, and his boots were red. He held his flute to his lips in a very jaunty manner, but his eyes were on the little shepherdess. He had been in love with her for a long time, but never a look did she give him. China Cat stood near the flute player, and one day she heard him sigh. "Why do you sigh?" she asked him. He shook his head, but did not answer. "I know," said the cat. "You are in love with the shepherdess, and she will not look at you. Now, let me tell you how to manage. First, you must stop looking at her. She knows that you are always gazing in her direction." The flute player shook his head again and said, "I cannot help looking at her. She is so pretty, and I love her so dearly." "But you must," said China Cat. "There is the flower girl on the center table. Look at her and play your jolliest tune, and see what happens." So the little flute player took China Cat's advice and began to play a lively air. He smiled at the little flower girl, who smiled in return and made him a curtsy. Then she began to dance, keeping time to his music. The flute player commenced to dance as he played, and China Cat moved her head from side to side. The little shepherdess tapped on the mantel with her gilt boot and looked toward the flute player. But he was gazing at the flower girl, and for the first time she thought him rather good to look at. "I cannot see what there is about that flower girl to attract him," said the shepherdess. "She hasn't a bit of color about her. She is as white as a piece of cloth. Even her flowers are white." By and by the little shepherdess began to dance, and she moved toward the end of the mantel where the flute player stood. China Cat rubbed against the flute player's leg. "Look," she said, "but be careful she does not catch you. The shepherdess is coming this way." His heart beat very fast, but he kept on playing and fixed his eyes on the little flower girl. But the shepherdess did not come any nearer than the middle of the mantel, and not once did she look at him. By and by it was dark, and the flute player could not see the flower girl. So he stopped playing, and his heart was heavy again. China Cat, however, was bound to make a match between the shepherdess and the flute player, and she walked over to the little shepherdess and asked Don't you think that he plays well?" "Who?" asked the artful little shepherdess. "The handsome flute player," said China Cat. "Oh, I have not thought much about it," answered the shepherdess. "Wouldn't you like to hear him play again?" said China Cat. "It would cheer us up. The room is so dark." Just then the moonlight streamed in the window and lighted the room. The little shepherdess looked into the distance again and said she thought it would be nice to hear the music. So China Cat trotted over to the flute player. "She wants to hear you play," she said, "and I think you can win her." The flute player began playing soft music and walking toward the little shepherdess. The music was so sweet and sad that by the time he reached her side, she was wiping her eyes. He stole one arm around her waist and told her not to cry, that he would play a jolly tune for her. "No, those are the tunes you play for the flower girl," she said, hanging her head. "I do not want you to play them for me." "I did not play any tunes for the flower girl," he said. "They were all for you." "But you looked at her all the time," said the now humble little shepherdess. "I was thinking of you," he replied. "Let us sit on the end of the mantel and I will play for you." "What would you like to hear?" "Play something sad," said the little shepherdess, for she wanted to cry when she was happiest. "There," said the cat, curling herself up for a nap. "I'm glad that is settled." She never would have given in if he had not looked at the flower girl. "These girls are queer creatures," she said, closing her eyes. The Revenge of the Gnomes. The fairies decided to give a party one night and invited the goblins, but they did not ask the gnomes, because they did not think of them. The gnomes lived so deep in the earth that the fairies seldom meet them, and so they really forgot, and did not in the least intend to slight them. But the gnomes heard the goblins talking about the party one night, and they were very angry because they were not asked also. The woods were very beautiful, and some of the trees were wearing their red and yellow leaves, for it was late in the summer. When the moon came out, the green and red and yellow made a pretty picture, and the fairies were delighted with the setting for their party. The fairy queen had a new carriage made from a petal of a white lily and drawn by 2 butterflies. The fairies all had new dresses of pink rose petals, and they had the fireflies in all the bushes and trees where they looked like so many tiny electric lights. The table was spread on a big rock. The rabbits were to wait on the table because their coats were white, and squirrels were to do the cooking in a little hollow. The tablecloth was spun by a spider and was so beautiful that the queen, when she saw it, thought it was a shame to cover it with dishes, so she had the rabbits put the food on a rock behind a tree and leave the beautiful cloth so the goblins could see it. But when the goblins arrived, they looked at the table with dismay. "Are not they going to have anything to eat?" they asked one another, seating themselves at the table and looking with anxious eye. Not a word did they say to the queen about the beautiful cloth, and she found that it was quite wasted on the greedy little goblins. There were so many goblins that the fairies were obliged to spread a table on the ground for themselves, and when the rabbits appeared with the food, the goblins jumped up and helped themselves, before the rabbits could serve them. At last, the queen, seeing that it was of no use to have waiters for the goblins, told the rabbits to put the ice cream and cake and lemonade and all the nice things on the table, and let the goblins help themselves. The bad goblins spoiled the beautiful cloth the spider had taken so much trouble to weave. They spilled the lemonade, and they crumbled the cake, and the poor queen was in despair. The goblins, not getting the food quick enough to suit them, had climbed on the table, which, you remember, was spread on a rock. Now this rock did not have any moss on it, and it happened that it was one of the doors to the home of the gnomes. The gnomes are little brown men, and they hide under the leaves and sticks that are so near the color of themselves that they cannot be seen. So they had been watching all that went on at the party, and when they saw the goblins on top of one of their rocks, part of the number hurried into the earth and opened the stone where the goblins were. Some of the goblins were quick enough to escape, but most of them went into the ground, and all the cake and candy and ice cream with them. The queen and the fairies jumped up and looked around. Everything was changed, and the fairies shivered as they looked. The trees were brown, and the bushes and the leaves were falling from the trees, making the ground look as though it had a brown carpet over it. The air was frosty, and the poor little fairies looked about in amazement at the dreary scene before them. The goblins that escaped were running around and calling on the queen to help them rescue their brothers. "It is all your fault," they told her. "If you had asked the gnomes to your party, this would not have happened. Now you must help us to get our brothers out of the power of those bad gnomes." "What shall I do?" She felt that her party had been a failure, and thought if she had asked the gnomes it could not have been worse. Just then a goblin came running toward them. He had been sent by the gnomes. They told him to say that his brothers would all be held prisoners until the fairies sent them all the ice cream they wanted. The fairies and the goblins hurried to the kitchen in their hollow, but it was empty. The squirrels and the rabbits had hurried off when they felt the frosty air and saw everything turning brown. "What is to be done?" asked the goblins. "You ought to help us," they told the queen again. "If we had not come to your party, we should not have gotten into trouble." The queen could not resist replying to this remark the second time. "If your brothers and you had not climbed on the table, but kept your seats, as well-behaved goblins should, you would not have been in need of help. We must go to work," she said to her fairies. "Fold your wings and pin up your skirts. We must make ice cream for those wicked gnomes." They worked all night, and just before it was light, the goblins carried ice cream in nutshells to the rocks of the gnomes. And by, the captured goblins came out and joined their comrades. "We lost our supper," said the goblins to the fairies, "and you should give us our breakfast. We are hungry. If it had not been for your party, we should not have lost our supper." This was more than the poor tired queen and her fairies could bear. They took their wands from under their wings, and, waving them, they flew toward the gnomes. Little sparks darted from the wands, and every time a spark touched a goblin, it left a little red mark, and at the same time it pricked them. Such tumbling and scampering you never saw as the goblins tried to get away. and when a goblin that had a red spot on his face meets a fairy, he hides or runs. For he knows that she will point him out as one of the greedy goblins who tried to make the fairies cook their breakfast for them. How the Buttercup Grew Yellow. Long, long ago, it is told that the flowers were all white, and that each received its color by some magic power. The little daisy, with its yellow eye, received its golden center when the angry elves pelted the little fairies with sunbeams. The daisy grew to be very proud of her yellow eye, and thought it showed off to perfection her pure white rim. One day she was looking about the field where she grew, and saw the little white cups growing all about her in abundance. "There is too much white in this field," she told the other daisies. "Our beautiful white borders would show off much better if the white cups were golden." "But perhaps the white cups do not wish to become golden," said her sisters. "Oh, but we do, dear daisies," said the white cups all in chorus. "We have always wanted to be a beautiful yellow, like your eyes. But we thought you would not like to have us that color, as we have to live in the same field." "Oh, yes, we would, and I am sure the fields will look much more beautiful with you a golden color than white. Besides that, we shall be seen to better advantage, so both of us will gain by the change." "But who will help us change our color?" asked the white cups. The daisy thought a long time, and at length she said, "You might get the goblins to color you, but the thing is to get them to do it. They are such queer little fellows that if they thought they were bothering the fairies, they would do it quick enough. But if we asked them to make you yellow, that we all may look more beautiful, they would only laugh and run off." "Why can't we make them think they would make the fairies angry if they made us golden?" asked the white cups. "I am sure we can find a way." "That would be the very thing," said the daisy. "But what do you propose to do?" "We will ask the fairies when they come into the fields tonight for their frolic," said the white cups. That night, when the fairies came flying over the field, the white cups called to them and told them what they wanted. "Oh, that will be beautiful," said the fairy queen, "and we can fool the goblins easy enough, as you shall see." The fairy queen called her fairies around her, and whispered so low that the field flowers could not hear what she said. But they heard the fairies laugh as they flew away, and each alighted on a little white cup and began to sing. "We love you, little white cup, our lady of the field. We will watch over you and keep you from all danger's shield. You are prettier than the daisy with her yellow eye so bright. You are like a waxen blossom in the pale moonlight." Over and over they sang the verse as they leaned over and kissed the little cups. And by, from out of the woods came the goblins, hopping and jumping like leaves before the wind. "Here they are," they said, when they saw the fairies. "Listen and hear what they are singing." When they heard the fairies' pretty love song to the little white cup, the goblins kicked up their heels and laughed, each laying a tiny finger beside his nose as he winked at his brother. Off they scampered to the woods again, and the fairies kept on singing their song, while the daisy watched with its yellow eye, wondering how her cousin, the white cup, could be made the color for which she had wished. By and by the goblins came back, but this time they carried bags over their shoulders as they crept carefully through the grass. The fairies saw them all the time, but of course they pretended not to. And when the goblins were quite near, the queen said, "Come, my children, leave your best-loved flowers for tonight. Tomorrow you shall come again." As they were flying away, they glanced back, and in the moonlight they saw the goblins hard at work over each little white cup. When the morning sun awoke, he opened wide his eyes, for all over the field among the daisies he beheld little golden cups, nodding gaily at their cousins with their golden eyes. Then next night, when the fairies came flying through the fields, they saw the yellow cups. "You are more beautiful than ever," they said to the golden cups, "and we call you our golden cups. But you must be known as the buttercups, or the goblins will discover our trick and make you white again." The buttercups thanked the fairies and told them they would be glad to be their cups whenever they gave a banquet, and that never would they let the goblins know the fairies had fooled them. So they bloomed among the daisies in the fields, and are called buttercups. But they know, to the fairies, they are the little golden cups, and the goblins wonder why the fairies always seem so happy when they fly near the buttercup, and find it changed. The fairies are too wise to let the goblins know how they fooled them and gained for the buttercups the very color that they wanted. But it is rather hard sometimes not to tell them when the little goblins scamper about and try to upset their plans. The Fairy Queen had taught them that silence is golden, and they know the Queen is always right. The Field Fairy. Jack and his sister Nina were two little orphans who had to beg from door to door for their food and a place to sleep. One day, a man named Simon told them if they would work for him, he would give them a home. Jack and Nina thought Simon must be a very kind-hearted man to offer them a home, so they worked just as hard as they could to repay him. But in this they were mistaken, for Simon was a very greedy, hard-hearted man, and only offered to take the children that he might get their work for nothing. Jack did all the chores about the farm, and Nina took care of the house, although they were both much too small to do such hard work. In return, Simon gave them a place to sleep on the floor of the attic, and very little to eat. If he had Nina cook meat for his dinner, he would sit by the stove and watch that she did not eat any of it. And when he had eaten all the meat, he would leave the bones and gristle for poor little Jack and Nina, who were half-starved. One day, Simon told Jack he was going to sell the big brindle cow to the butcher, and that he was to drive her the next day to town a few miles away. Jack and Nina were very fond of brindle cow, and wept bitterly when they heard this. They begged Simon not to let the butcher have her, but he told them he would not listen to any such silly chatter, and for Jack to be off the next morning bright and early. Nina put her arms around brindle cow and cried when Jack was ready to lead her away and watch them down the road. But the tears blinded her so she could not see far, and she went back to get Simon's breakfast with a sad heart. When Jack came to the woods, he led Brindle Cow to a stream to drink, and while he sat on the bank, waiting, he was surprised to see a fairy slip out of a lily as it opened. "I thought you were never coming," said the little creature. Jack thought it was to him she was speaking, and while he tried to find his tongue, which clung to his mouth, he was so surprised, Brindle Cow answered. "He had to wait for daylight, you know," she said. Yes, I know, but the sun will soon be up, and I must get home before that, said the fairy. Now, what can I do for you? Save my life. I am on the way to the butcher now, replied Brindlecow. You told me that day I did not eat the field flower in which you were sleeping, that you would help me if I ever was in need of help, said Brindlecow. Last night I saw one of your sisters and told her my sad plight. The field flower fairy would help me if I could only find her, I said. Oh, she will be by the stream in the wood. She sits in a lily until it is time to go home in the morning. I will tell her, she said. Of course I will help you, said the field fairy. I will change you into anything you like. What shall it be? And there is another thing, good field fairy, said Brindlecow. This poor boy will be punished if I am not carried to the butcher. Then the money he gets carried back to Simon. The boy and his sister have been very kind to me. They never forgot to bring me water, and gave me salt many times when their master did not know it. I should not like to get them into trouble, even to save my life. Oh, please, don't mind us, said Jack, who at last was able to speak. Nina and I will not mind being punished if only you can escape the butcher. I have thought of a plan, said the fairy, that will save you from the butcher, and will not cause your two friends the least harm either. It is this. Instead of changing you into some other shape, why not change your master into a kind and good man? Oh, that would be best of all, said Jack. That is, if Brindlecow does not object to remaining a cow. I would rather be a cow, if I can be sure I'm going to live, replied Brindlecow. But you can understand, of course, there can be no joy in life for me with that butcher staring me in the face. Well, that is all settled then, replied the fairy. And though the sun is getting well up, I think I can get to your master without letting the old sun man see me, for it is cool and shady along the road to the farm. You two wait here and see what happens. Jack wondered what the field fairy intended to do, but he would not be surprised now at anything, so he began to pick some berries, for he had not had his breakfast, and now Brindlecow was sure she was not going to the butcher, so she began to eat the sweet grass by the stream. Jack thought she might speak again, and he patted her side and nose, but the only answer Brindlecow made was to rub her nose against him and moo. After a while, Jack heard someone calling his name and running down the road. It was Nina. Oh, I am so glad I found you, she said. Come quickly, something has happened to Simon. Jack let Brindlecow take care of herself, and hurried after Nina, wondering what the fairy had done to Simon. But it seemed that Simon had brought on his trouble himself by trying to save the wood that morning when Nina told him she needed more wood for the fire. Instead of giving her more wood, he had poured on some oil, and the flame had blazed up and burnt him. When Jack and Nina reached the farmhouse, Simon was on the floor, groaning with pain. Forgetting all the unkindness that they had received at his hands, Jack and Nina lifted him from the floor and placed him on his bed. Then they did all they could to relieve his sufferings. Nina bathed his face and hands, and Jack bandaged them, and by he fell asleep. When he woke, he asked for some gruel, and then remembered Brindlecow. Poor creature, said Simon. I wish I had kept her, even if she was getting old. But it is too late now, for of course the butcher has her. Just then, moo, moo, was heard outside, and for the first time since he left her at the stream, Jack thought of Brindlecow. Why, there she is now, he said. I did not get to the butcher's this morning because Nina called me before I had gone beyond the woods. "I'll never sell her," said Simon. "Go out, Jack, and give her a good dinner. And tonight see that she has a nice bed of straw in the barn." That day for dinner, Simon told Nina to have a good meat stew, and that Nina and Jack were to eat all they wanted. Jack told Nina what had happened at the stream in the woods, and asked her if she thought the fairy had anything to do with the accident that had happened to Simon. "Of course not," said Nina. "Fairies always do good, not bad things, and besides, Simon must have been burned at the very time you saw the fairy, and I wonder if you really did see a fairy after all. Are you sure you did not fall asleep and dream it all?" Jack was quite sure he had not dreamt it, but never again did Brindle-Cow speak. At least, Jack never heard her if she did. But when Simon recovered from his burns and was quite well again, something did happen. And whether the field fairy and Brindle-Cow had anything to do with it, Jack and Nina never knew. Simon was a changed man, that was sure. He would not let Nina do the work any more, but sent both of the children to school. He fixed up the house and bought new furniture, and, best of all, he bought nice clothing for Jack and Nina. "And if you don't mind," said Simon to Jack and Nina one day, "I wish you would call me Uncle Simon." He even bought a nice horse and pretty willow carriage for the children to drive to school. In fact, everybody thought Simon must have lost his mind. He was so changed. "It must be the work of the field fairy," said Jack, when he and Nina were talking over what their neighbors said about Simon. "She said she would change him into a kind and good man. Perhaps she came and found him burnt and thought she would wait and see what happened to him," said Nina. "But I think you fell asleep that morning, Jack, while you were waiting for Brindle-Cow to drink at the stream." "Brindle-Cow saw the fairy, didn't you, Brindle?" asked Jack, as Brindle-Cow came up the stone wall where Jack and Nina stood. Brindle-Cow looked over the wall straight at Jack and answered, "Moo." "It does not matter, Jack," said Nina with a laugh as she patted Brindle-Cow on the nose. "It has all turned out so well, and Uncle Simon could not be kinder or nicer to us if he were our father. Sometimes I think it is all because when he was so sick and helpless that we were kind to him and did all we could, even though he had almost starved us and made us work so hard. I think he is sorry for it and is trying to do all he can now to make up for his unkindness and make us forget it." "Perhaps you're right, Nina," said Jack. "So we will forget it. But I am sure about the field fairy, and Brindle-Cow knows it is true, for it was the fairy who saved her from the butcher." But all the answer Jack could get from Brindle-Cow was "Moo."